Welcome back to our director series on Wes Anderson. Today we will discuss the two latest additions to his filmography, the 2021 The French Dispatch, his love letter to the art of journalism, which has been considered the most Wes Anderson movie to date, and the 2023 Asteroid City, a movie about a TV broadcast about a play set in a fictional asteroid city. If there is a sentence that can encapsulate the core message of this movie, art is not to be defined, but to enjoy. Let's get into it.
Beans?
Before we begin, I must admit, in my personal opinion, these are some of Wes Anderson's most abstract movies. I'm curious to know your first impression on these two movies.
I'd kind of agree and disagree. I do feel like most of his films are quite abstract by default, by how he tells stories. Like some of those earlier films, maybe not so much, but even when you think about like Grand Budapest, it's like a story through a story through a story, right? It isn't, it isn't what's laid out in front of you. And even, I'm trying to even think of some of these other films now, but none of them are like, even thinking of like The Aquatic Life, like it's pretty abstract.
Yes.
But like definitely in these two movies in particular, definitely like on a whole other level of how he tells these stories of like through the eyes of someone else telling a story kind of thing. Because French Dispatch is kind of like two levels almost, where an Asteroid, like you said just then, Asteroid City is like 2 to 3 levels of like inside. But I do think it bodes well for these movies. I did enjoy both of them, and I do think they're both different in how they tell their stories, but like in both, like you said, both kind of abstract in their way of dealing with it.
And my first impression of these two movies is I didn't really understand like the ending message of these two movies. So after watching them, I had to go online. I had to do a bit of research.
Just like a lot of people.
Yes, and trying to understand what the message of the movies is all about. If you want, we can start with the first movie.
Always good to start at the beginning.
The 2021 The French Dispatch. So this movie was written, directed, and produced by Wes Anderson, but he wrote this movie with Roman Coppola.
Okay.
I'm not sure if the name sounds familiar.
It does sound familiar. I'm trying to think.
He's, I think he's the son of Francis Ford Coppola.
Yeah.
Yeah, Godfather.
There you go. Didn't feel like The Godfather.
And Jason Schwartzman got a bit of writing credit for this movie as well.
Well, that's what I was going to say, because I think he was only in it briefly as well. He's like one of the journalists at the start. No, he's the artist. He draws little things for the newspaper.
So before we dive into this movie, we need to talk about the eventful 2022 Oscars, where no one seems to remember the movies, but everyone seems to remember the slap.
Oh, wow. Wow.
So this is the first Wes Anderson movies since 2007 to get 0 nominations for the Oscars.
Which is crazy.
I mean, he's been nominated for his movies for a long time.
Well, that's the thing as well. It could be the like being a bit worn out by it.
But then again, for the 94th Academy Awards, there are a lot of strong contenders, but a lot of new movies as well. You like Coda, Belfast, Drive My Car, and Dune Part 1.
Part 1.
Yes.
Well, there you go.
So there are a lot of strong contenders. But do you think that he should have been nominated for at least one of the categories?
I do think it's a good film, but it's hard to like. How do you like give it? Like, did it need more props? Did it deserve something? I don't know. It's hard to say. Like, without like watching every movie from that year and being like, yeah, that probably needed a nod. Either from its acting or directing, writing, kind of whatever. But I think it's hard to just like, I think it's always hard to pick right every year. And even you just saying that's crazy that he had that's such a good run. Because I feel like we've talked about how he directs before, but no one really quite Wes Anderson's a movie like he does, right? No one's really been able to recapture his style, I feel. It's very unique.
And there is an opinion online about his style, because now people are saying that, this is a Wes Anderson movie, like it's its own genre. When you go to the cinema, I'm going to watch a horror. I'm going to watch an action movie. I'm going to watch a Wes Anderson movie.
I will say I haven't seen any Wes Wes Anderson films, the only ones I've ever felt like are his movies. Personally, I don't know. I've not that I've seeked it out or anything, but there hasn't been any other movies that I can think of to.
But there have been a lot of parodies from people on TikTok trying to replicate his style.
Well, there you go. I don't go on TikTok.
Yeah.
So there you go.
For me, it's a bit ironic because I think we discussed this before. In the 2022 Oscars, they included an Oscar Cheer Award and a fan favorite movie, which were both won by Zack Snyder's movies.
That's why I never trust the fans.
But at least he didn't get a statue, but he got 2 awards. The fan favorite is The Army of the Dead, starring Dave Bautista.
Yeah, and the moment was like the Flash thing, wasn't it?
The Flash entering the Speed Force from the 4-hour Justice League movie. I mean, if you really want to know how Tim feels about that movie, watch this 5 worst DC movies.
They should have put the moment in when the Joker said he'd give Batman a reach around. That should have been it. That's more interesting than the Flash.
Yes. So yeah, the 2022 Oscar was very controversial for different reasons. Now let's get into the movie. So this movie is an anthology comedy drama made on a $25 million budget and a box office of $46.3 million. And it was premiered at the Cannes Film Festival in 2021. So what is this movie about? Can you encapsulate the core message of this movie in one sentence?
It's tough, like you said, because it's like contains like multiple stories. But it is kind of, I think the overall, from what I gathered, was about this the what do you call him? Like the head honcho of the magazine?
The editor, the chief editor.
Yeah, kind of how he influenced these writers and how he was willing to give them any kind of leeway they needed to write their stories and kind of the lengths he went through for each one of them to help them get to that length. So I just feel like you said at the start, like let people speak for their art and not try to hold it back. I feel like that's what this editor was doing.
Yeah.
Even though Bill Murray, who plays him, isn't in it a lot, but I feel like it's like the tie that it ties all the other stories together. His kind of understanding of what he wants. Because through these, like when we hear the story and then we'll like kind of cut back to the newspaper and he'll be like talking to the writer and he'll be like, oh, can we do this? Can we cut this? Can we do this? And he's like, oh, no, we should really have this in or we shouldn't really have this in. And he really tries to communicate with the writers and like try to get across the best message or the story very well. So I kind of enjoyed how these stories kind of connected together because we were kind of start at the end because it tells us at the start that he's died, right? And then it kind of reaches around to the end. But that's what I got from it. I forgot, like, it's really showing how these 3 different... Was it 3? I feel like...
There's supposed to be 4 because the last one is the arbitrary.
Yeah. So it's like, it's kind of the conclusion, right?
Yeah.
But I did enjoy how it kind of like these 3 different writers in 3 different styles and how he kind of manages and keeps them together and willing to do kind of what it takes to get their stories done.
And I think the best way for him...
I don't know if that was one line.
Yeah, that was a very long line. And in the way that the characters summarizes it is write it as you write it on purpose.
Just try to make it sound like you wrote it that way on purpose.
Yeah, that's what
make it sound like you wrote it on purpose.
Yeah.
So this movie is a combination of 4 smaller stories, all set in the 1975 fictional French town, and I'm going to butcher the name of the town.
Yeah, I was scared.
Ennui-sur-Place. And the 4 smaller stories are The Cycling Reporter, The Concrete Masterpiece, Revisions of a Manifesto, and The Private Dining Room of the Police Commissioner. So let's start with the shortest segment, which is always good for word building. The writer is Herb Saint Sassorak.
What a name.
Played by
Owen Wilson.
Our
favorite boy is back at it.
Yes. So this is the shortest story, but it's used to build the world and the setting that our characters are in.
And even how it's going to be filmed going forward. Because I feel like there's a lot of stars that he sets up in the first story that he used later on in the other stories in different ways. Like the use of colours, like black and white. Was used in poignant points, and even like the long. I don't even know it's like a long shot.
Yep.
But it's almost like a scenic view of like a city street or something. But I just thought it was very interesting because that's what he used. Obviously, the cyclist was kind of like doing like a tour of the town, and he's kind of writing it from his viewpoint while he's riding around town, and he's talking to us as well. He's talking to the audience as he rides around, like doing this stuff.
Yeah.
So I did find it quite interesting, and I'm like, it sets up quite well for how the rest of the film will be shown and directed.
And do you have any favorite segments in this story?
I think it was at the start when he was like the present in the past.
Yes.
And it was like the black and white and the color, and it had like the two places matched up where it was like, oh, that's where it was in like the 60s and where it is in the current time.
Yes.
I thought that was very cool.
Yes, and my favorite segment, it's a bit unexpected. So he was telling us about like, yep, this is what the city used to be. This is what it is now. Oh, by the way, there's a corpse in the river. Some guy just trying to get it up, and surprisingly, the amount doesn't change over time. It's like it's such a random detail.
It's kind of very, very Wes Anderson.
Yes.
That kind of like a bit absurdist. Like, is that really necessary? But
And
it's
even
kind of
the
charm.
editor said that as well. Like,
Yes.
do you want to get some place nicer, like
Yeah.
a flower shop or something?
Shop or an
No,
art
I
museum.
don't.
A pretty place of some kind.
I hate flowers.
Yeah, he's like, oh, you're talking about well, like pimps and hoes and stuff. Like, oh, does that need to really be mentioned? Like, yeah, that's kind of important to the story.
Yeah. Yeah, and obviously he wants to demonstrate that the city is beautiful in its own uniqueness, even with its all the ugliness that he has as well.
I will say another favorite when he's on the train.
Yes.
And then they like stops and he's like, and the rats that are like shuts
Oh,
to the back,
yeah.
and then there's all the rats on the back, and I'm like, that was cool.
And the cats dominate all the rooftops.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's just very, very Wes Anderson. It feels like an animation.
Yeah, well, he still does a lot of stop motion and stuff through the film like he usually does. Because I think I've mentioned this in the last one. He uses it instead of like CGI. He uses usually the stop motion or even like models, like small models to kind of recreate it. And I think it gives it a bit of charm as well. Like if we even jump back a little bit to like even the opening scene when the waiter, he's got all the stuff on the plate and he's walking up like the building. That's very like the dollhouse. And then we're just following the guy as he like walks up to the top, right?
Yes.
So it's very, very much in his style.
And it's so funny that the way that the waiter has to go through just to get to the newspaper. And it's like there's a ladder somewhere.
I did like when he got to the end, he had like a shot of whatever the drink was. And he's like, oh, I got to have that now. I think I've deserved it.
Yeah, so this segment is very straightforward. And it kind of sets up the tone of the movie, Then we get to the first story, the first major story. Oh, sorry. One of the things that you mentioned about the introduction is the contrast between black and white and colors.
Yes.
And the image in each frame is one of the favorite things that I like about this segment. So in this, at first when I watched this segment, I thought that black and white is the past, colors is the present.
Yeah.
But when you dive into the other stories,
It's used differently.
yes. So let's get into the first one.
Yes.
So the story is the concrete masterpiece, and this is my personal favorite story of this movie.
It's very like there's a lot going on.
So this story is mainly consists of four characters. So the writer, the artist Moses, played by Benicio del Toro, the art dealer played by Adrian Brody, and Simone, played by
Leah Seydoux?
Leah Seydoux, yes.
there.
Yeah, so these are the four main characters of this movie. There is a theory that I want to get your opinion on. Some of the fans of the movie said that the characters in this movie are basically the vessels for artistic expressions instead of the driving force of the stories. What do you think about this theory?
I think that's like a hard thing to kind of break down, but I think it is meant to be more for the vassal of what like the writers are doing. More than maybe, I don't know, hinting at the stories themselves. Because I do think all of the stories are quite interesting. And I do feel like it's not just there for it kind of thing. Because I did enjoy them, especially this one as well. Like you said, this one's very good. Because it's just like it deals with a lot. And even like the characters are quite fun and interesting to follow along with. Even though this guy, like even the artist who's like, he's murdered two guys. And even that, he was just annoyed by them. And he's just like, oh, he does it's like, don't growl at me.
So his younger self was played by Tony Ravioli.
Is that how you pronounce it? That can't be right. It can't be
No,
ravioli.
like ravioli is the pasta.
Yeah.
No.
But he makes another appearance. He's from
Yes.
Grand Budapest.
Yes, and I like the direction style of him putting
Getting
the
older.
necklace.
That was a great scene.
That's
when he
great.
sits down, he pours the drink, and then his older self comes up and he takes off the neck. No,
Yes,
he
yes.
takes off the necklace and
Yes.
puts it on his older
Yes,
self.
yes.
But yeah, that was a very touching scene. I'm like, oh, that's a great way to like just showing getting older, even though it's like just changing the actors, but it was just done so well. I don't know why I was like, oh, That's amazing. That's great.
Yeah. If we get back to the theory that we mentioned, I kind of agree with them on the aspect of, if you look at the stories, the characters, they don't really change much. Like for example, in this case, Moses, he's like in the beginning, he sets up that he's a struggling artist. He's in prison, and until the end of the movie, that doesn't change.
Well, it doesn't need to, does it? Like, it's not too much about like his progression, because his progression is about if he wanted to do this art or not. That's kind of his struggle. Like, he was also struggling with being in prison and being in love. I think him being in love with Simone, the guard, was more important to him than the art. Because I think that's why, like most artists, that was kind of his muse, and that's why he initially, the first art piece that Adrian Brody saw was of him doing an art piece of Simone. And that's kind of like why he was doing it. He wasn't doing it for the money. Adrian Brody's character saw it as like, this is something. This is something. I can definitely do something with this.
Yes.
So that's kind of like his kind of motivation for the film, not too much about him getting out of prison or like making a better life for himself. He was kind of more obsessed with Simone and like connecting with her and trying to have a future with her, because it stays off early when they do have a connection and they're like they're sleeping like head to head.
Yeah.
And she's like, I love you. He's like, no, don't say it. don't say it.
I don't love you.
What?
I don't love you.
I don't love you.
I don't love you.
Yes.
And it's just like brutal and
And
honest.
during that scene, like I'm sure that you noticed, as soon as he heard that, he looked up to the ceiling and then he started seeing colors.
Yeah.
So this is a theory that I read online that the fans think it may be true, but the colors in these stories represent the focus. So black and white is the details, right? The colors, and what are in colors? The writers and the art pieces. So these are the focus of the movies.
There are certain points as well where something will be in color and then go back to black and white.
Yes.
So like you said, it's like a point of like focus. I definitely agree with that, because that's what, not in the first story so much, but later on through the rest of these stories, that's how he uses color sometimes. He's like, oh, this is like a focus that we need to like, it means something, this point, right?
Yeah.
Which was great, because you notice it as you watch the film, oh, this is in color. It's like, oh, okay. I understand why they did that.
I didn't understand in the first instance. So when I read about it, sorry, I'm a bit shallow.
You're like the other people on Google is like, do I enjoy this film?
no, like my question on Google was like, what is this movie about? Like I didn't understand the underlining message.
You weren't watching this on double speed as well, were you?
No.
Darren?
I was watching it on normal speed. But I did read a bit of the script for the first story as well, because I liked it so much. And in the script, Wes Anderson put a giant note that says the whole story will be in black and white, except for when the writer speaks at the conference and the painting.
Well, there you go. Like that's kind of shows that's what he focuses on. Because even if we get back to kind of the story, Adrian Brody's like, we've hyped you up. You're like the most famous artist alive. You got all these followers. You got all these people. We need you to finish your like piece, whatever piece you're doing, finish it. And he's kind of like, and then he's like, and then Simon's like, it's done, it's ready. And he's like, oh, fine, it's ready in a week or whatever.
Yeah.
And the kicker is he like did it in the wall. He did it in the prison wall.
Yeah.
So it wasn't easy to take away. But led again, one of the artists, one of the buyers who was with the writer was like, I'm gonna put down like a deposit, and they're like, oh, can we have that now? He's like, no. But it's just such a great way to kind of tell this story, because he is just like a dude, and like they hyped him up so much, and it's like you can't rely on someone else, especially someone like him who's very kind of impulsive, and because in point in this film he just try to off himself because he's had enough, and Simone's like, oh, cut that crap out and get back to what you're doing, kind of thing.
Yes.
Because I think it does say at the end that they like kind of she gets what she needs. She gets from the like photos and the art and stuff that she can make a life for herself. But that's the thing, right? Like it's kind of sad that like, oh, was he getting used a bit by the guard in the end? Because even the writer, she was like, oh, we had a bit in a fling with the artist, she said. I'm like, oh, okay. And even late when she's talking about it, she's like, oh, he essentially tried to like assault me one time. And I'm like, oh my God.
Yes, and the writer in this story is J.K.L. Berenson, played by Tilda Swinton. Yeah.
Back again.
Yes, and
a very Wes Anderson thing, bringing back all the actors he loves.
That's it. And like during the presentation, she told told the story about how she came across this artist. And one of the aspects that people brought up is, I think when we get back to the moment of him and Simone sitting side by side, or on the opposite, that's where the idea comes from, which is oppression creates art, not freedom.
Something about the captivity of others enhances the experience of their own freedom. I assure you it's erotic.
So in this case, it's a bit ironic because his muse is his imprisonment, the guard. So people are saying, like, if Moses is free, maybe he wouldn't be able to create all the art pieces that we get to see, or Julian wouldn't get to see them. But then Julian is a representation of reality because he says this in one of the dialogues: all art is for sale. If it's not for sale, then why would you make it?
When he goes in to buy the first piece, he's like, for how much? He's like, I'm not selling it. And then like Simon's out there like looking at him, and he's like, how much? What do you say? Like 50 cigarettes? No, 75. He's like, no, I want to give you like
real money, francs, 400,000 francs.
But he's like, I'll give you whatever I've got on you, like a couple of cigarettes and like Chewy or something. But yeah. Like in a sense, I do think that there are obviously other examples where it's like wrong. There's a famous one where the guy, he sells his art, and when it sells, it went through the shredder.
Oh,
I don't know if you ever saw that, but it was like I think it was the kid with the kite, and as it sells, it has like a little shredder and it shreds the painting, which I'm sure made it more worth more money because people are like, oh, this is the one that. But it's not like, because that's what, or even think of the more famous one, the banana on the wall.
Yes.
So it's just like most art, it's subjective. But like touching back on the point you were saying about him, it is like art is made from your situation, right? Like it's like saying taking away everything he is, he won't do it again. Yeah, right? Like that's, you're in a situation of your environment, right? So it's hard to be like, oh, if he wasn't anything he was, he wouldn't be able to do that. I'm like, yeah, exactly. But this is the story, right? I think it's a bit like, I think it's a fair like assessment, but that's like life. You're a part of like whatever you live, and however you live your life, that's going to take part in whatever you do in life. So I think that's all it is. I don't think it's like, I don't know, any more than, And
I think at the end, like when Simon got the money, and it says that they never got into contact ever again, and it never mentioned that if Moses made any other art pieces, because I think the 10 murals were his last artwork, and because after that, after the fight in the prison, and he helped.
That was pretty funny. I like that. Like it was meant to be a still frame, but they're all just standing there. And you can see them like moving a bit. I thought that was funny.
And there was a handheld sequence of him and Adrian Brody chasing each other on a wheelchair. That was
fun.
Yes. But you mentioned the still frames. That's another thing that I like about these short stories. There are a lot of moments where if you just pause the movie and you just look at the frame, it looks like a 3D painting in a way, with a lot of characters and different expressions and things like that. And again, I'm very surprised that he didn't get even a nomination for production design.
Because even when you think of that scene in a normal film, it would have literally been a freeze frame, right?
Yes.
But in this, it's literally them standing
Yeah.
as the camera's like moving. I love it because when I first said, I'm like, that guy's kind of like moving a bit. He's not really standing that still.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, but that's like the point. That's like kind of like a joke on itself, right?
Yes. I really like the contradicting ideas in this story. So the art can only be created when you are oppressed, and when you are liberated, then you lose kind of your muse to.
But he was already a good artist before that. He already had like art before he was in prison.
But nobody cared about that art.
Yeah, because one guy wanted to profit from it, so he hyped it up. So it's like,
and that's a sad thing.
That's like another thing as well. It's like, was it really him, or was it Adrian Brody's character that made him popular? So that's the thing.
I like the sequence where he tried to convince the other art dealers that this is a good artist. So he said, if he wanted to, he can draw this beautiful bird. But he thought this is better.
Yeah. I think that's what he was saying, like the test of a good artist. If he can draw or like paint or draw something from image perfectly, then he's probably a good artist. He's like, look at this bird. It's perfect. Can I have it? No.
I mean, this story is one of my favorite. And, I think the connections between the characters are very interesting to explore. I don't think there are anything else to add.
No. It was very, very enjoyable story.
So did the editor add any notes for the writer after this? I think that the actual writer was not in the editing room, and just like,
because he was reading it in with the room with her, but I can't. He was going through the expenses, and he's like, "Did you need to be in this hotel paying like eating like 5 dinners a day or whatever. And she's like, yeah. And then Bill Murray at the end's like, oh, bill it. He's like, all right.
Yeah.
Because that's what I mean. He kind of gives in to their like, they're the way they produce and make art. So he's like, all right, I'll take this hit.
Yeah. No, I love it. And I think before we move on to the next story, there's a small sequence that I want to discuss as well, which is the sequence where Julian Cardazio, played by Adrian Brody, tried to bribe the guards.
That was great when he's like,
Yeah, just passing the money around, and then you see more and more people appear on the trailer.
Because it comes back.
That is a great frame as well.
Yeah. I was gonna say like later, and they're like, "Oh, all the prisoners are rioting," and he's like, "Oh, I didn't bring enough to bribe them all." And then he like opens the door, and they're all there. He's like, "Oh," and that was great as well when he shuts the door, and they all like break through the wall. But yeah,
funny.
A lot of great moments in that story.
So then we move on to the next story, which I think I will need a lot of help from you because I think
I'll try my best. This I'll definitely say this one's probably the most.
The revisions of the manifesto. So the writer in this story is Lucinda Crements, played by Frances McDormand.
She's been in another bunch of his films as well.
Yes. Which one?
I think she was in, which one? I do remember her face. She's definitely been in another Wes Anderson film, I'm pretty sure.
Yes. And of course, this movie is also narrated by Angelica Houston as well. But what a detail that I noticed is in this story, the writer was not in color throughout the story until the very end when she spoke to the editor. So what are your thoughts on this story?
When you talk about abstract, because it's very much trying to hint on like rebellion and youth, kind of like discussing your ability to kind of influence the world at a young age when you're told to do something and you kind of don't want to do it and you kind of want to have your own way, how far they're willing to go. And Timothée Chalamet's character, he's the one that's like trying to like push, because he has his manifesto or whatever, like all, revolutionists have, and he's trying to push this idea or even try like through the whole film, they've all got multiple different ideas of like what they want, but trying to fight for them through the whole film. And he's kind of like he's the idea of it. So that's like trying to capture what his ideals and ideas were for their kind of like group, for their like protest or their stand or however you want to categorize it. But that's why it's a very complicated because they're always like switching ideals and new ideas and always arguing and stuff. But
so I did try to simplify the understanding of this, and I read somewhere that you're absolutely right. The core idea is about revolution, youth. But I think it all started from something very petty, that the combination of the two dorms, the guys' dorms,
that's
and the
at the
girls'
start,
dorms. But then one of the students who got the conscription and he escaped from the military, and he burned
the badge, but he was pretty much, he just didn't want to be conscripted, right?
And then they just started clapping.
I'm like, this is weird.
So I think his story kind of became a new ideal. And then it led to the chessboard revolution. I think that's definitely a metaphor for the different strategies that two sides decide to do. But if we get back to the focus of the story, which is the writer, she's like since the beginning of the story, she said, I need to maintain my journalistic neutrality.
And then literally sleeps with him like in the second scene or whatever after they meet each other.
And then she wrote the manifesto as well. So
she's like, oh, I kind of wrote like revised it and read a bit more. And I'm like, all right.
And it made it sound like you, I think. And she added an extra page as well. So this story, I had a really tough time understanding it, because when we get to like the climax, then she realized that the other female student was also in love with this guy, and then they ran away. And this is when the sequence changed to color. So what are your thoughts on this? Why did he change to color?
Because they butt heads through the whole story, right? And I think it's her, because even before this point, she's like talking about the manifesto and the things that are different and that like don't seem like him or seem changed. And then she's like, oh yeah, I wrote it. And then it's more about them figuring out, because she's like, oh, I like apologized. You should like acknowledge it. You gotta, I think it was like trying to be like a grown up, but also that she's been doing all this for him anyway. Like there's more to it than just kind of like butting heads and like complaining and like trying to be the one that's right, or because that's what it seems like. He would have an idea and the girl would be, no, this is how it should be done. So it's kind of like them just realizing it's like, oh, okay, maybe this is what we're here for more than what we're, because they were in the middle of the chess match, right?
Yeah.
They lose, which is funny. They're like, yep, they're done. It's a default checkmate. We win, and they're like coming to get them or whatever. So, because that's why it's hard to follow, because it's like there's all these ideas kind of flowing around, but they're trying to figure out what's important to them and what they really like stand for and stuff. And I think it's just them coming together that really kind of can clarify where they're going forward, working together instead of like against each other.
So if we base our understanding on the premise that we made, like the colors represents the focus of the stories, right? So when both of them get onto the moped, rode away, and then I think they kind of made love in the bunk bed, and then they move on to the dorm rooms with all the boys in a separate play discussing about the future, and one of the boys, jump off the building.
I think that was earlier. That was earlier in the film when they're talking. It's like the abstract, as you'd say. They're like talking about, what was his name?
Mitch.
And they're like, here's let's talk about Mitch in his like play. And then they like jump to the play and they're like, and they talk about how he saw the guy like kill himself because, he didn't want to be a part of this or whatever. And that's why he's like, I don't want to do this. It's not really what I'm here for, what I stand for. So that's just like a part of the whole rebellion in youth of like, what say do you actually have when it's like you're inscripted to go fight a war that you don't want any part of, right? Being a part of a battalion, you don't even want anything to do. So it's like rebelling against that and trying to fight for your own thing. But then it's like, that's what I mean. So it's like, and they all got different ideas as well. So it's all trying to find the right idea. Like, so that's, that's why it's so I feel like it is a bit more complicated, this story, to try to like get to what it's either hinting at or what ideas it tries to get across. Yeah. Because obviously at the end, when they're in the radio tower and he's I think he's reading out his manifesto again. Yes. And then he ends up falling off, he like fixes it and like falls off and dies and falls in the river. Yeah. And then I like at the end how the writer's like, that image of him is used more now. Like his image of what he was is kind of outlived what he is kind of thing. So it's kind of a weird, like we see that a lot with a lot of kind of like characters like that in history where they're kind of like glorified with like an image or for what they were, but like are you really standing for what they stood for kind of thing? So it is kind of like a complicated story and he's like figuring out where, you stand on it, or if you're just like, that's the guy that did all that, this chess rebellion, right? Or whatever. So it's very political in that way. Like politics is never never as easy as it should be, but it's always like convoluted and complicated.
Now that's a fair point. And at the end of the story, the writer came back to her writing room, which is a bit weird because she sits in the corner with her back to us, with a stack of books, and then the editor just came in.
So can I come in? Yeah.
Yep.
And she's like, I'll just sit there.
Yeah. What does that represent, that small sequence there?
Well, even that she maybe hasn't even learned from that story, because they talk about her being kind of lonely and cut off and kind of keeping to herself. And she's still like that as we jump back to her writing. She's still very tight to herself, not really open. Like even when he comes, he's like, just sit there, like, So it's still like the writer she's still kind of out of it. She still doesn't maybe learn herself from like the story she's writing. So that's kind of like interesting as well. Like, would she still be, like we talk about, like, would she be still as good a writer if she wasn't like how she was? So it's kind of like who they are as a person is what creates how they're able to create what they can. And
up until this point, we have seen 3 of his main writers, right? And it seems like all of them are walking contradictions. So the first one is the cyclist, but he's supposed to write about the city, but he wrote about the good things and the ugliness, right? And then we get to the first writer who tells the story about the artistic side, but then she told a story about one artistic side and then the reality of art, and then this actual writer is a walking contradiction. She doesn't want to get involved, but she slept with the guy and then wrote the manifesto for him,
and then also like had a part in it. Like she did butt in and talk to them about stuff. So that's the thing. I think, like even when you get to the last story, but it's just like, I think that's what makes them a better writer, even though they maybe don't want to admit it. That kind of them to able to experience the story in their own way makes it more interesting rather than maybe like how everyone would assume it to be, right? Their own view and the way they see things maybe makes it better. But that's like what you mean. That's like, it's funny, like, oh, they're not, they're doing the things they're trying not to do. But
yeah. I think it's a very common trope in all Wes Anderson's movies. All the characters have contradictions about themselves. Then we get to technically the final story. Private dining room with a police commissioner. The writer is Roebuck Wright, played by Jeffrey Wright. This short story is about food. So he's a food writer. So and he's retelling the story from a talk show.
Yes.
With Dick Cavett.
Yes.
Played by Lev Schreiber.
He was in Island of Dogs.
Spots?
Yeah, I think so.
Spots,
Yeah.
So I think since the beginning of the story until the midpoint, the story is pretty straightforward. He goes to the police commissioner.
Well, he's lost for the first like 5 minutes. He's like, I got in this building. I got like,
the police station.
yeah. Oh, I thought that was funny when he was walking through different rooms and was like, oh, what's this? What's this? And he's like,
And there's a sequence where he sits in front of the cell, and then he just like got freaked out.
Yeah, and we find out why later. But yeah, I just thought that was an interesting scene where him like, he's got the wall and he's like, whoop, and then shoots into the next scene, which is kind of cool. But yeah, that was kind of funny. I'm like, oh, where's this going? I'm like, isn't he meant to be talking about food? And he's like going to eat with like the commissioner.
And we need to talk about the star of the show. That is Nescaffier, the chef who does the amazing food. So there's a sequence where he started cooking where all the fire came up, and then he turned into like 4 people.
Yeah, that
doing
was fun.
doing like 4 different things. So I learned that he only cooks for working police officers.
Well, there you go.
Yep. And Robert Wright was just having a nice normal dinner. Then the story took a complete turn.
When the son gets kidnapped.
Yeah. I was like, what is this? And I think this is where Wes Anderson pays another tribute to the visual artist for the newspapers, when he turned the chase sequence into a cartoon.
Comic strip. Yeah, I was
comic strip,
I'm like, oh, this is kind of cool.
Yeah, what do you think about this artistic choice?
I thought it was interesting because it plays a part, right? Like it makes sense. Even though it's like a story of a story of a story, right?
Yeah.
There's like few levels to it, but no, I thought it was funny. I thought it was a good way because that's where he would have probably had the stop motion or something usually. But this is like a different style. I'm like, oh, this is kind of makes sense for the story as well.
And the hero of the story turns out is to be Nescaffier. So after he got the Morse code from the boy, he came in and he brought the poisonous food. Then he got the chase sequence, they saved the boy. And they were saying like after years and years of training, he withstood the poison. That's how he survived.
Yeah.
Now we get to the end of that story, and the editor was talking to Roebuck, and Roebuck took a segment out of his story, which is the conversation he had with Nescaffier at the end. What is your opinion on this? Should he kept it in, or should he let it out?
I think it was important to keep when they're like discussing it, and I'm like, oh, that's kind of brutal, but I felt like it makes sense, because I understand why he wanted to leave it out, because he understands that it probably puts him in a tough situation if he releases that. What do you mean? Because they're talking about it because they're both foreigners and they both deal with tough issues like trying to appease people, and he's kind of saying that they're like, oh, we're kind of doing things above and beyond for these people, but just to get treated well. Just like everybody else. Because earlier in the film, we find out that he gets imprisoned for just being gay. And then the editor comes to bail him out. He's like, if you write for me, I'll bail you out and like pay you properly and stuff. And he's just like, so that's why I thought it was funny. It's like, he kind of gets him out because he was already a writer before. He had like some stuff, but he's like, hey, how do you feel about reviewing stuff? How about reviewing some food for me or whatever? So it was kind of like shows that like, he really does care about these writers and is willing to go so far out of his way to help these people.
Yeah.
And that's why I think he like takes when he says, I know you should leave it in, that he goes, okay, like you can put it back in. Cause obviously he's like, he crumpled it up and like threw it away. I can't remember what the exact line is. Did you have it? I remember.
No, I don't remember the exact lines, but I think the main part of the piece is the conversation with Nescaffier, and Nescaffier talked about when he tasted the poison and he discovered the new flavors that he never tasted before. And I think the core message is like, what is the limit for excellence when you try to become the best at something? For example, cooking, writing, painting. Would you go to the length of self-destruction, or should you stop right before?
So I did write down the quote. He says, "Seeking something missing, missing something left behind." So it's just like, it kind of means a lot of kind of like you said, trying to find something, of excellence and stuff, like looking through that.
Yeah.
So that's why I was like, it's kind of like a brutal ending.
Yeah.
Of kind of like, this is like a brutal ending for like meant to be writing about food.
So in this story, most of the details are in black and white, even the cooking scenes.
Well, the food was in color.
Yes.
When they actually served the food, they were in
Yes.
color. Because like we said, that's like meant to be the focus.
Yes.
And also the chase scenes were in color. But yeah. It was definitely used differently in this story compared to the others. But that's what I like. It was used in different ways. Because obviously in this one, it's meant to be, like this is what he's meant to be writing about. But there's all this other story going on, right?
But at the end of the day, if he is a food writer, I personally think that he should have kept that in, because that encapsulates like the flavor and the food, and it puts the whole story together.
Yeah, it
in
does.
in my opinion.
It does mean a lot for the context of the story. But I can also understand why he didn't want to put it in there.
Then we get to the final one, which is the obituary, which was written by all his writers in the room. But then we didn't get to see it. I think the obituary is like the final tribute.
But I do like at the end because they all like come together to help write the final kind of like message for him. Because at the start of the film, it actually says he's like, when he dies, it's done.
Yeah.
That everyone gets paid out, everyone gets, gets what they're owed, and everyone gets back all the subscriptions they don't. So he was fair, like he was pretty fair. He didn't like cut anyone off. He's like, I died, just like do my final thing, and then you're all free to do whatever you want. And no one gets like cut off or whatever, right? Which is kind of like touching, like yet again, he's there to help them. And they're willing to help him out as well for this like final send-off for him as well.
It acts as a dual meaning as well, because basically what Anderson is trying to convey is the era of journalism and magazine and printed materials is dead. After this editor dies, because now everything is subscription, everything is online, nothing to be printed anymore. And the central themes of this whole movie gets boiled down to the three main points that I could think of. Oppression creates art. So whether it's painting, revolution, food, or writing, journalism is a form of art, and the writers are the artists. And the movie is a love letter to journalism. People saying that this movie is inspired by the New Yorker magazine, which is a big inspiration for Wes Anderson.
I think at the end of the film, he had like a bunch of journalists that he was inspired by. So
all from the New Yorker.
Yeah, so it's just like, he obviously has a clear love for it.
And then the last question that I want to pose is, what is the connection between all the stories?
Well, it's for who they work for, right?
The editor.
They all work for the editor. And he's the one that's put him in this situation to tell these stories, right? Without him, they wouldn't be these stories, right? They'd all be off. Who knows what they'll be doing? But I think that's like I said at the beginning. Like I think he is the one that ties this story together. And what I feel like it is, like I don't think this is like one of the best Wes Anderson films, but it's definitely up there. Like, it's hard to like look like maybe it's like top 3 or 4 for me, maybe, but I think it is a very good film. I enjoyed it a lot, and I was like, this is it was quite touching.
Yes, the aspect that people discuss about this movie is also about the directing style, the cinematography, the set production.
There's a lot he uses in this. Like he uses everything he's learnt from this point. All the stop motion and all his dollhouse stuff.
Yeah.
Like I said at the start, like the cinematic backdrop kind of thing as he lets like a scene come alive as all the extras come on set and start doing something and stuff, make it feel lived in and alive. Like you feel like this is a world. Like I feel like Wes Anderson always does a great job. No matter how absurd it is, it feels like a world or a place that's been lived in.
I completely agree with the fact that he didn't get even a single nomination about this movie.
It is hard, like we were saying before, it is tough, but it is funny that he got so many up to this point.
Yeah.
Like this is still like, just for that artist, the painting story as well. That story was amazing, I felt.
Okay, I think we can move on to the next movie, the 2023 Asteroid City.
Asteroid City.
Another star-studded production. I cannot believe that this movie was made with a $25 million
Yeah, I know.
budget.
Is it time for the swipe, Darren? Oh,
That's
there
right,
we go.
Yeah, so this movie was written, directed, and produced by Wes Anderson, and he co-wrote this movie with Roman Coppola again.
Again, well, there you go.
Yeah.
They must have some chemistry.
Yes, and this movie got $54 million out of the box office, premiered at the Cannes Film Festival, and released in the United States in 2023.
Because this was a Universal film as well. I don't know if any of his. That's what I was thinking. I'm like, oh, was this his big, like, only big kind of big name production thing? I was like, oh, Universal. I'm like, I don't remember if any of these other films had like a big.
Like, so the French Dispatch was released by Focus.
Yeah, so that's like a smaller group usually. Yeah.
Yeah, so then this movie is another Wes Anderson's work that did not get a single nomination in the 2024 Oscars.
Which is fair. Like I was going to say, if we look, that was a pretty crazy year as well when you look back at some of those films. But yeah, it's funny that he gets so much love and then it's like, oh, like not even like a nomination, right? Like he doesn't have to win, but because once we get into the story and stuff, but yeah, it is a bit weird, isn't it? Because he did seem like a darling for them for a little while, right?
Yes.
Like, oh yeah, ooh, Wes Anderson, ooh,
Yeah.
And then it's kind of like, we're kind of done with you now,
Yes.
kind of thing. They've like moved on, which is always hard because there's always new directors coming on, new stories to be told. So it's always hard. Like he did have a pretty good run, like you know,
2007,
yeah,
all the way to 2021.
yeah. Because even the Isle of Dogs got nominated, right? So that's what I mean. It's crazy, but yeah.
Yes.
Interesting.
So the log line of this movie is about a TV documentary about Asteroid City, a play written by a playwright, Conrad, played by Ed Norton, which is depicted in the stylized color widescreen. So
It's crazy.
that's it. I mean, like talking about meta, like the TV presenter is telling us
Bryan
about
Cranston? Cranston.
Cranston. And he's telling us about the TV documentary about the play, and the play is being played out.
He's kind of like the documentary guys, like talking us through what's about to happen, right?
But we also learn about how the play came to life, and the actual play is played like a movie. So
Because it just reminds me of Rushmore.
in what way?
Remember the main character of Rushmore? He liked to do his plays. I'm like, Wes Anderson always wants to have something to do with plays.
Yep, and it took it to a next level.
Yeah,
so you
he's
see the
literally
play
like-
as a movie, and then you watch the background things as the play, which is very interesting. So the cast, it seems like the cast that he works with,
I think
gets bigger.
This is the biggest cast yet, or like he's always had great actors and great actresses, but this is like the biggest probably yet. What, Scarlett, Tom
Cranston.
Hanks, Cranston,
Yep.
Steve
Steve Carell.
Steve Carell.
Yeah.
Am I missing anyone else? I feel like it's still a big list. Who's that girl? The girl that plays the teacher. She was from like Stranger Things. She's an actor's son. I can't remember. Ethan Hawke's daughter.
Right. Yeah.
I think her name's Maya Hawke.
Maya Hawke's.
Yeah, but even I was like, I remember when I watched this when it came out initially, and I was like, oh, she's in it as well.
Yeah.
But I'm trying to think if I've missed anyone else. I'm sure I have. There's like
Schwartzman. You got all the usual
the
suspects.
classic. No Will though.
No Willem Dafoe. No Bill Murray.
No
as well.
Bill Murray.
But you know why Bill Murray was not in this? He contracted COVID-19.
Well, there you go.
But he came back for the trailer.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
Still got him in there somehow.
So he was supposed to play the hotel manager, the role played by Steve Carell.
Oh,
But
not
he
a
got
bad
COVID-19.
backup.
Yes.
Because it definitely seems like a Bill Murray role, kind of like a guy in the background. He says a few lines.
Yeah. So when he came back after COVID-19, Wes Anderson gave him an extra role, which is this tycoon who has a lot of money, and he walks around the set with Jason Schwartzman's character, and they talks about the movie. Oh, they talked about the play. Sorry,
Talk about the play.
Yes.
Oh, so he's the actor and he's talking to the actor.
Yeah.
Getting into these levels.
Yes, that's the trailer.
my God.
Okay, so let's get into the movie. So the main characters of this movie is Augie Steinberg.
Augie, yeah.
Augie Steinbeck.
Well, it's always. I was thinking about this just before, and I'm like, because the characters are the actors playing the character. It's like weird to like think
Yes,
about it.
so meta.
Yeah.
Yes. So the main characters
Augie,
for the
yeah.
movie is Augie slash Jones Hall, Mitch Campbell, or Mercedes, or Scarlett
God.
Johansson. Yeah. So the layers. But my favorite character of this movie is definitely the alien.
Yeah.
Played by Jeff Goldblum.
And I think he's literally only in the suit like once or twice.
Yes. And he was like, I'm playing the alien as a metaphor. What for? I don't know. It's very funny. So
It's funny seeing him back as well.
Yeah, it's just so random. And I think this is the collaboration between Jason Schwartzman and Wes Anderson after a long time as well.
Oh, well done.
From the Darjeeling Limited.
No,
until,
wasn't he? No, he was in the last film.
French Dispatch.
Yeah, he was in it. Schwartzman. Yeah.
But for some reason, like during the press conference, he said that it's been a long time since Schwartzman and I worked together.
Oh, really? Because he was in a French Dispatch. Only like 2 or 3 scenes.
Maybe,
not like
yeah.
a long. Not like.
Yeah.
He like obviously he's the main guy in
Yeah,
this,
yeah,
but
yeah.
I mean like
Yeah. Maybe that's what he meant.
as a main character. Yeah.
As a main character. Yeah. Okay, so what do you think about this full story? What is the movie is about? Is a better question. Yeah.
Well, that's what I mean. I feel like it's better to kind of go through it than like explain it.
Yes,
'Cause
yes.
I remember when I first watched this and I was talking to a mate about it. I'm like, it's a story about a story about a story.
Yes.
But like, does that make it any less like meaningful? I don't think so.
Mm.
Because if you think about already a movie is a story anyway, how do you tell that story? I don't think it. I think it still did a good job of telling that story. It was just in like we said, abstract. It's very an interesting way to look at it because. As you're talking about, like the actors they had in it, I love that the start of it, and he's like, here's all, and they had like the shots, and all the actors were sitting there, and he's like, this is this person, this is this person, he plays them, this plays them, and I'm like, it almost would have been funny if he actually did it as their actors. He's like, oh, Jason Schwartzman's playing Augie as in the play, as in like he could have been like the writer or the director.
Yeah.
But that I don't know if that would have been like too meta for him because I don't think he's done that yet. But that seems like a too level he doesn't. He likes to do it in itself more than including himself in it because that's like the next level. Him actually playing himself, directing a story written by a writer and casting these actors in these roles.
Just do a Deadpool 16 walls.
Well, that's what I mean. Like that's a very like kind of Deadpool, like breaking the fourth wall. But he does it in his own way, essentially. Because I really enjoyed that scene when he introduced everyone. So here's all the actors, and that's funny.
Yes. And this main story is about Augie and his 3 daughters went
his
into
son.
this and his son.
Yeah.
And Woodrow. Sorry,
Yeah, Woodrow.
So they went to this fictional town called Asteroid City, named because there was an asteroid in the city, and they came
Very
here for a scientific convention.
Yes.
It's kind of similar to the Royal Tenenbaums, where all the kids are geniuses.
Yes.
You know, and
They've
all
got their own
inventions.
talent.
Yeah.
But this is like they're all smart and they've all invented something, right?
Yes. So up until that point, I was still able to follow the story. Yep, this is the main event. They're here to watch some events
The
happening
lights,
in the sky.
yeah.
Yep.
And I love that they put the boxes on their head.
Yes, yeah. And some kid put it on backwards as well.
Yeah.
I can't see anything.
I can't see. Put it back right.
Yeah, so up until that point, everything is fine. But there's
Then a thing comes out of the sky.
yes, but before that, I think Augie's character wanted to tell his daughters about the passing of their mother.
Yes, because he calls up Tom Hanks, who's the grandfather, and he's like, "Oh, the car broke down." And that was a whole funny scene as well. And then he's like, "Oh, the car's broken down. You're gonna have to come pick up the girls." And he's like, "What? What do you mean? Like, I'm not going to babysit them." He's like, "Can you come like pick them up?" And he's like, "Have you told them yet?" He's like, "No." He's like, "You got to tell them." He's like, He's like, "You got to tell them." So that's like the whole thing. I think after that, he talks to them all and he's like, "Yeah, your mum's not coming back." And then I think Woodrow's like, he's like, you already knew, didn't you? He's like, "Oh," she's like, "She's been dead for 3 weeks." And then they're like, "Oh, is she in there?" It's like, "In the Tupperware?" Yeah. I thought she just kept doing Tupperware.
Yeah.
It was funny.
And I learned about this as well. So Wes Anderson wrote these details into the script from the inspiration from Jason Schwartzman's real life story.
Oh, okay.
So during the interview at Cannes Festival, Jason Schwartzman said his dad passed away when he was 15 and his mom and his older brothers was telling him about, there's nothing wrong with how you feel. If you don't feel sad, that's fine. If you feel sad, that's fine as well. But during that time, they didn't know how to tell him the news. So Wes Anderson knew about these details, and he added that into the story. And the funny thing was, Jason Schwartzman was like, "Oh, Wes Anderson called me one day and he said, oh, we're writing a story about you." And I was like, "Oh, okay." And then he didn't realize this is the detail that he picked to write a story about. So so it seems like this role was written for him.
Which is even funny if we go through the story and about how the guy that plays Augie, the actor, how he gets his role. He like goes to the writer and he's like, "Oh, I just finished this play. It was terrible." And then he goes gets into character and plays Augie, and he's like, "You're perfect." And then apparently they make out because they're lovers.
Yeah.
I'm like, "Oh, okay."
Yeah.
I'm like, "Oh, sure.
Why not? And because we got the details of the writers passed away because of a car accident.
Later in the story.
So that is another element of loss and grief that Augie's character has to go through. So this is like the parallel between the character, the actors, Jones Hall. So he lost the lover in the play. He lost his wife, and then in real life, Jason Schwartzman lost his father. That's the connection.
So that's what I was thinking. I'm like, it does play in well with what his character was going through.
Yeah. So very meta.
Very meta.
Yeah. Then we get to the main attraction, which is the alien.
The alien.
I love that sequence.
That was
so much.
great. I love that everyone's just like, and he's just like, and then when he goes to take the photo, he poses. He's like, he goes up and he goes.
Yes. What does that sequence even mean?
I don't think it means too much. In a great aspect of stuff, it's not a great thing. But for all the characters involved, it challenges their world beliefs. We're talking about other films like Heretic before, challenging your beliefs in religion. This just challenges your belief in life. What does this even mean?
Yeah.
Because later the teachers, she's teaching a class.
I love that.
And all the kids are talking about the alien. And it's oh, where is he from? Or where could he be? And she's like, no, I'm trying to talk about the space. And I think
the planet, Venus, Mars. And it's like, where do you think he comes from?
Yeah.
Is he nice?
And then the cowboy that has a thing for her comes along and is like, I don't think he means us any harm. I think he was just coming home and just having a little gander, having a little look. Yeah. And then she's like, oh, I agree. And then they kind of stop talking for a little bit. But I did like that because all the characters have a bit of a questioning of their own life and what they're actually doing. Because Augie has the kind of fling with the actress.
Mitch Campbell.
All the geniuses are kind of we got to get this out of here. We need to tell people. We need to show what happened. And a lot of those, the kid that always did the experiments. Dare me to jump off this. No. And he jumps off. And he's like, oh my God.
And that's so funny as well because there's one sequence where his dad asks him, why do you always ask people to dare you to do things?
Yeah, that's what I mean. They get to a point where they're like, I'm not putting up with this. He's like, why? He's like, I fear my existence in the, this plane of the world. Oh my God. And then the dad's like, dare you to do what? He's like, climb that cactus. No. I love that. It's just like, what did you, all right, I get it. What did you want? Something stupid. No, get out of here. And start questioning your existence.
And during one of the interviews, Wes Anderson mentioned that the idea of the alien was inspired by the 2020 COVID lockdown and quarantine.
Yeah, you could see it clearly. After it happens, I have the quarantine. I'm like,
yes.
This is very much.
Yes. And one of the audience members asked him, did you write that into your story? Why did you write that into your story? And he said that writing a script is a very improvisational step. So you kind of have to incorporate different ideas and your different experiences. And I think what he was trying to convey with the quarantine is after such a traumatic event, such as seeing an alien, taking a picture of the alien, people were supposed to just go back into their normal lives.
Yeah, exactly. That's the thing, right?
But they can't. It changed them. So.
Yeah, exactly. Every character is nearly affected by it. So it's they're questioning themselves, except maybe Augie and the actress.
Yeah.
She's still practicing her scenes and stuff. And even she's like, oh, I think. What did you say? I think your son saw us in your room the other day. It's
practicing.
And she did you tell him? I'm like, no, I didn't tell him. And I'm like, oh. like trying to explain what their situation is or whatever. So it is all very kind of like strange. But I do enjoy it because all the characters are all like going through their own thing after the alien appears. And even I love the like you said, it's meta when they have like the intermissions and they cut back to like the actors or like the sound guys and they're all like telling their story. When they go to Adrian Brody, is he like the sound guy or the director?
He's the director, yeah.
Yeah, and he's like living there on the set and he's going through like he thinks his wife's going to divorce him.
Yes.
Your favorite actress.
Hong Chau.
Yeah, shows up.
Yeah.
My favorite scene was in that he's like faking like doing the punching. Goes
Yeah.
and right next to him is the actual thing. So I'm like, I love it's kind of, I don't know if it was deliberate or not, but it's like for the movie. It's like we're doing all this work, but the real thing's there. Like, you know what I mean? It's kind of like, oh. But I thought it was funny because then he talks to a guy and then he goes back to it. He's like,
yeah. And then Augie came in, and I think that's my favorite interaction of the whole movie. So I think, and this is where the core message lies as well. Augie came in and was like, I don't understand the play.
Yeah.
Like,
That was a
am I
big
doing
moment.
it right?
Yeah.
And he's like, you don't need to understand it. You just need to keep telling the story.
Yeah, he says you're doing a character well. Keep doing it. And he's like, do I commit to it? Yeah, just keep going.
And it reminds me, Margot Robbie is also in this.
Yeah, because that's what I was thinking. I remember, I'm like, when was Margot Robbie into it?
Yeah.
But she was his wife.
Yes.
But she didn't get the part, and her only bit in the thing was cut.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, and then they had this beautiful conversation.
Yeah, it was very touching.
That scene looks like a play.
Yeah. Well,
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like,
again, they're meant to be actors from a play, and they're in play. Like that's what I mean. Like it's all set up very purposely, right?
Yeah.
But even that scene was very touching. As she's like, he like doesn't quite remember the scene, but she's like going through it and like explaining like what her loss means to him and stuff. And I thought that was very, because it's funny thing because it's like it's a cut scene, but it's not a cut scene because we see it.
Yeah.
And we actually see it and get like the weight of the conversation and of what it means for the characters. So I thought it was very powerful. I was like crying. I'm like, oh my God, this is so beautiful. And then they're like, oh, yeah, it's like, I'm doing this part. And they like kind of go off and then the other guy like comes out, like, hey. And I'm like, oh, they've just moved on. I'm like, oh, this is such like a powerful scene, I feel. And it's just like the way it conveys it is very interesting. And I'm like, oh, that's what I kind of like. We say like the dispatch is like abstract. I feel like this is
way more abstract.
This is extremely abstract. This has got like so many things kind of going on for it. But I do think I think it works well. I do enjoy it.
And the thing is, like, Wes Anderson kind of jumps between different layers of the storytelling as well.
Yeah.
So Bryan Cranston, when came into one of the scenes, like, am I not in this scene?
I'm not in this?
Oh,
That
sorry.
was great. And he just like walks away.
And there is an analysis online where we were saying that this movie is not supposed to tell you the answers or the meaning of life that you're searching for.
No.
And you have to interpret it. You have to put your own contribution to it to understand it.
Yeah, because it's hard to like, because that's what I mean. It isn't like a straightforward film. Like, if you've watched probably other Wes Anderson films, it probably won't be as rough, I don't think. But like, if you're coming into this, you'll be like,
what the hell?
what? Like, it's kind of like in the bright lights. You're like, what's actually happening? But like, even before we like watched most of Wes Anderson films now, I did watch it a first time and I still enjoyed it then. I enjoy it just as much now, but you kind of get the tropes that Wes Anderson does and how he does things and it kind of makes sense and you can kind of follow the story and what he was aiming for. But I could very much see that because it does, like, this maybe feels like his biggest film. Like, it feels like it should have been like a blockbuster, but his story isn't like a blockbuster film. It's not easy to take in. It's not easy to sit there and people to just like soak in and enjoy it. There's like a lot you got to follow and kind of pay attention to. So it's hard. That's why I was like, oh, because it is set out. It feels like, oh, this, I don't know if he sold it. It's like, well, this will be a big blockbuster. Because none of his movies really have been huge blockbusters. Like, was it Royal Tenenbaums was maybe? No, or was it Budapest that probably
the
made
Budapest is is the biggest movie financially. So that was just like cracked nearly $200 million.
Like nothing compared to like what other directors get and stuff. But because there's so much in this film, like you're talking about when he dies and he's in the, what do you call them? They're like the improv group. And they're like, what's it like? Imagine what your character would be like sleeping. Sleeping isn't just sleeping. And there's Willem Dafoe in there and he's in there. I was like, he's the teacher. I'm like, oh, that was funny. Because they're all chanting, you can't wake up if you don't fall asleep. I think it's meant to be about him passing,
Yeah.
that he hasn't fallen asleep, and that this is it. I think that's what I was trying, because that's what I watched the scene like a couple of times, and I'm like, I think that's what it's hinting at, because they do mention his death, and then they cut to this scene, and then they all chant, and it like cuts to all the actors saying, if you don't fall asleep, you can't, like, you don't wake up, or you don't sleep. So I was like, that was very powerful as well. I was like, oh.
What is your interpretation of that sentence? Because I read online that someone was trying to interpret it. Well, number one, Wes Anderson said that this movie to him is a poetic meditation on the meaning of life. The other idea is no matter what you see, like if you don't see a meaning around you, then just keep telling the story, just keep living your life, and you will find the meaning in the actions. Not in life itself.
Like in most art, you can take your own kind of meaning from anything you watch. But like and especially the way he tells an abstract story. But I definitely, like he says, it's even when they're talking about the play, what's he say? Like a cosmic, like theatrical. I can't remember what the writer says, but he says at the start what he's trying to like
Set the scene,
display.
much.
He's trying, when he was explaining to the group, he was like, "Oh, what's the name of the story?" And he's like, "Oh, I want it to be like this cosmic thing." And I do think it's kind of an interesting, because all these characters are at a certain point of their life, or whether it's a big moment or just passing through, but they all have this big moment that makes them question it, right? And I do think it plays across. And then, like you said, it does affect the actors and stuff. They all have their moments, and even like we talked about Adrian Brody's character, he also questions like what he's doing. Is this going to help him through his life? Like he thinks he's about to get divorced, and what's his son or daughter? But yeah, they're like talking about that. So it does come. I do like that it uses the different angles of how he tells his story, and like the different angles from outside the play and actually inside the story. And I think it does a great job, because even like if we go back to one of the funniest bits in the film, the car chase that happens like 3 or 4 times in the film. It's like, and then like 5 minutes later it happens again. And then I think it happens at the end of the film. The last scene in the film is the car chase comes back. And then that kind of really makes it feel like a play, right? Because it's just like, how would that car and cop has been chasing each other for what? How, 2 weeks now?
Yeah. Yes. No, I mean, this movie, I personally think that I need to have another viewing, but probably after reading a bit more about the idea behind the stories and things like that.
It is definitely his most challenging film to date.
Yes. People, like his fans, like the movie, and this movie got a lot of positive reviews. But I
don't think the audience would probably be as...
No, this is not a movie to enjoy, I think, unfortunately. But I think this is a movie where you have to like meditate on it. You have to like sit on it.
Because I still think there's some enjoyable moments in it. Even like Steve Carell's character, when they have the machines, he's like, "Oh, can you actually buy land out of this?"
Oh yeah, like the vending machine.
The vending machine, so you can buy plots of land.
Yeah.
He's like, what do you mean? It's like I don't know, it's like a very small plot of like desert land.
Yeah.
And he's like, "Oh, it's for like 20 years or whatever." I'm like, he's like, because they were buying martinis out of it. He's like, "Where'd you get that?" It's all over there. And it's like shows the machine. So there's like those little things and he's like, "Oh," and when the guys come to book in their room, and he's like, "Where's my room?" And he's like, "Oh, sorry, we got a tent for you today." He's like, "What happened to the other one?" It kind of like burnt down. Then it like shows you, then he's like putting up the tent, and then the whole thing next to is like burnt down to the ground. And I'm like, oh. What other moments? Like, I do like the moment when how they have to look in the box.
Yes.
And the kid's there talking to Tilda Swanson, the scientist, and he's like, "Oh, she wants him to help." And he's like, "Oh, I can tell your devotions because he can see." She says, "If you look at it blind, you can see, you get them burnt into your retinas." And he's like, "I can see that's how much you care." And I also find it funny when they have the message that comes through.
Yes, like the sign behind them as well.
And
so
then the guy's
explained
like,
it.
No. The guy's like, "Oh, why does that say at this date?" And she's like, "What?" He's like, yeah, this is saying today. And that's when the alien came.
Yeah.
So it was just like them when they're going to come. And it's just like funny. I love that the kid's like, "Oh, yeah, no, that's what it is." And she's like, "What?" And she's like, "Oh, we just discovered something." And even like the alien he brings the meteor back. He's just like, bloop.
Yep. And then the general was like, "Oh, this has been inventory."
Yeah. The guy's like, inventory, because he just left some writing on it or whatever.
Yeah.
And I'm like, see, like even the alien didn't really mean much.
Yeah.
The alien's just doing what he wants.
And then he rushed everyone back into quarantine.
Yeah.
Love it. Like just before, like he got the letter from the president to release everyone.
Yeah. He's like, "Oh, we're going back."
Yeah. So we got Jeffrey Wright, we got Tony Raffaoli. I think that's his last name. And who else? I mean, like this is a big cast, and this I think they helped portray this story really, really well.
Did you see how much Scarlett Johansson got paid to do this?
No, I didn't.
She literally got like $33,000 a week to do it. So I think she got like 30 grand all up to do it. So she took a huge cut to like do this film. Like I don't know how much the other guys, like I could imagine Tom Hanks might have been the only one that might have got like a bit of money, but he mightn't have even probably got paid that much. Because as we've seen, he uses a lot of the same actors again, which I think is like a two-way streak where he enjoys working with them and they clearly enjoy working with them. Like Adrian Brody's been there since I've already gotten the name of the film, The Dali Limited, right?
Yes.
And then even Edward Norton's been with him a long time as well.
Yep.
The Wilsons when they can, but that seems like they've been friends for a long time, right? But like even like Schwartzman and stuff, obviously Bill Murray.
Tilda Swinton.
Yeah, Tilda Swinton's been in it since, I think she was in The Moonrise Kingdom. Was that her first film or was she in one of the other ones?
I think she's one of the later ones.
As well? I'm trying to even think. That's the one I remember. Because she's not in like the Tenenbaums.
No, I think she was in the Grand Budapest Hotel.
But that was, is that after? Is that after Moon? That's before Moonshine?
No, after.
It's after Moonshine.
So Moonrise Kingdom is 2012. Grand Budapest is 2007.
Okay.
2017.
Yeah, okay.
Sorry,
there we go.
Yeah.
So Grand Budapest is what we're saying
Probably
is
the first movie that we thought,
I was going to say, I could look through my book, but
that's okay.
We'll just keep guessing.
So we finally caught up with his
So we're up to date.
filmography.
We did say before, he has those like Netflix short films about Roald Dahl, but he has other short films. We'll see how we go. Maybe we'll do a little thing about his short films, but at the moment, we are up to date.
We're up to date. And, if he makes another movie in the future, which he likely will, and I'm very...
Asteroid War 2.
And I'm very excited to see like who else he's going to bring into this movie.
Or where he's going next, because I do feel like there's been pretty dramatic jumps from each film. So who knows what's next?
All right, so we have reached the end of the episode, and we really hope that you enjoyed this series about Wes Anderson. Let us know in the comments what you think about his directing style, his movies. Leave us a like, click on the subscribe button, click on the bell, and we're going to have a new series about a new director soon. So stay tuned on it.
Stay tuned.
And until then, my name is Darren.
I'm Tim.
This has been Movie Beings.